Hi guys, welcome to the Invicta Gaming Podcast. Today is our Last of Us 2 discussion / debate. I'm joined by two of my friends here. I've got Gareth. He is a fellow vocalist, quite established singer in the metal scene, and also an avid video gamer. So, duly qualified to comment on gaming. And Richard is a very established filmmaker and also a long-time friend of mine. He's made lots of music videos and lots of good films, so I'm sure he'll be weighing in on the narrative side of this discussion.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm more awkward at this stuff, despite having a YouTube channel. I'm still terrible at it.
I think Rich is probably used to being behind the camera.
Yeah.
Or the controller. So, I mean, we've all finished the game, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to start by just kind of establishing where everyone's at in just like a general sort of feeling on the game, positive or negative. I think I know roughly where you guys are at, but Rich, what did you think just overall?
I loved it. I kind of wanted. I love the way Naughty Dog write. They don't pander to the fans, and they don't just make a game that they think's going to sell, like, you know, the next Call of Duty or whatever. They really want to tell a story, and that means upsetting the players. Then that's cool, and I love that. I love that riskiness, and I think there's very few game creators out there that do that. That for the backlash that this game has had, I think is so sad, because it may stop them doing that in the future, and we'll end up with more Call of Duty style games that is just giving you skittles. Do you know what I mean? And that's not what I want.
I saw someone comment, they said a lot of video games are described as like a love letter to fans, and this feels like a hate letter to fans.
yeah, absolutely.
Gareth, where are you at with it, just generally?
Yeah, I loved it as well. I second Rich's sentiment of like Naughty Dog's writing being very unique in the world of games. You know, it's kind of interesting, like you have the parallel to like Uncharted 4, like the first Uncharted games, like the first three, they were all kind of very, here's an adventure, you know, let's go get some treasure and some gold and all this kind of thing. And then Neil Druckmann writes Uncharted 4, and it's a story about kind of honesty within marriage and the bonds of brotherhood and stuff like that. And then The Last of Us 2 is like, hey, we're going to do more of this like deeply human writing where people act like human beings and behave like human beings, except in The Last of Us you've got all the trauma and, you know, the pain that comes of living in a post-apocalyptic world. I loved it.
It feels like it kind of
greatness. Yeah,
it feels like it came from the school of like Game of Thrones style writing.
Well, I think it had, as far as I remember, I think they said they were getting some of the Game of Thrones writers on The Last of Us 2, so I don't know if that ended up being the case.
I think it was someone who was involved in writing Chernobyl, but it was a HBO writer.
Yeah,
wow.
Because I remember when they finished Last of Us 1 and they were talking about doing Last of Us 2, so it was a little bit after. They did say that they were speaking with the guys from Game of Thrones, so I assumed...
And he was just like, kill everyone.
Yeah, just, who's your favourite people? Kill them. Just get rid of them.
Well, I've seen a few people kind of making comparisons between The Last of Us 2 and Season 8 of Game of Thrones, which I think is incredibly fucking cruel, to say the least, but the comparison is out there.
Yeah, it is. I think I'm going to come from the place of... I like the game. I'm pretty positive on it. I've just finished up my review for it. Although obviously I don't want this just be like three people agreeing over everything about The Last of Us, and I did have some issues with it. I think I had more issues when I sort of, because I'd been avoiding all the spoilers and any like discussion talks about it, obviously, but I went back and sort of watched a few of them, and some of them are just, you know, unreasonable and I don't agree with, and some of them I think put voice to some of the reasons I didn't like, well, some of the things I didn't like, but maybe couldn't put my finger on why I didn't like them. And I think they were quite well expressed by some of these people. So I'm going to try and come from a place of, I like this game. I'm not entirely sure it justifies existing, or maybe it like, because The Last of Us 1 was obviously like, by most people's regard, like a very, like, pretty much like a masterpiece, sort of perfect territory. And it's very hard to like follow that up with a sequel. So The Last of Us had an uphill battle to justify its existence with a sequel. And so I enjoyed it, but I'm not sure it was perfect or the masterpiece that everyone's saying it is. So I'm going to try and combat some of those points, but also come from a place of I did like this game.
I think I agree with you there. Like, The Last of Us 1 was just a pure masterpiece, and even that game, to be honest, the ending I hated. even though it's absolutely
it was
perfect.
very divisive.
It's a perfect ending, and it took me a couple of days to get round to that. But it wasn't the ending I wanted, which I wasn't used to. You know what I mean? And then realizing that it doesn't have to be the ending you want, but it's the ending that it is. And I was like, that's really cool, and that's actually really interesting. That's what made me fall more in love with Neil Druckmann's kind of directing style, and just going, he doesn't care what people want. He's going to give you what the story needs, and that's what's brilliant about it. But the ending wasn't a good ending. So where everyone's saying, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that, these are great characters, it's like, yeah, but the ending of The Last of Us 1 was so brutal and harsh, and you just want him to tell her the truth, and he doesn't. He's a douche at the end, and you're like, no. Do you know what I mean? And it still has that same feeling, but I think people have invested into these characters that they've built up in their head, and then to lose them is like, how dare you, this is blasphemy and stuff. And
I feel like that's the crux of it. Like the Last of Us 1, much like The Last of Us 2, obviously, the characters act like actual people, and that means they're flawed and they don't make the right choices all the time. And I feel like I see this a lot with like all kinds of media. Like, people get a few years between the last release and the new release, and maybe the last release wasn't particularly well liked at the time. I see this in music and games and films all the time. They're like, it comes out, people go, oh, it's crap, oh, the story was rubbish. Fast forward, like 3, 4, 5 years, and people are like, oh, that was a masterpiece, it's sacred, you can't mess with it, this is how it was. And I feel, especially with the character of Joel, people have since built Joel up to be this kind of infallible, sad dad figure, and I feel like it's been further like exacerbated by, like Dad of War existing, and I don't know, I can't think of any others. So maybe there wasn't this whole slew of like sad dad media in the wake of The Last of Us.
I mean, Joel's iconic. He's definitely iconic.
He is. He's an iconic character, but like, why is he iconic? He's iconic because he's incredibly well written, and he's a very empathetic character. And I think the empathetic thing is the most important thing about Naughty Dog's writing. They make you feel for characters that do often really quite awful things, because you understand where they're coming from, and you respect their humanity.
Well, that's
and then
sorry, go on.
And then it feels like with The Last of Us 2, that's kind of gone out of the window for people. Like, oh, these people are just pieces of shit. How are you going to make me play as so and so?
We can spoil it, by the way.
Spoiler territory yet?
No, we can
spoil it. Okay. Yeah. So it's like, how are you going to make me play as Joel's killer when it's like, you made me play as a guy who doomed the entire human race?
Yeah, and he's like, held in such high regard. Like, Joel didn't deserve what he got. In the second one, it's like, he absolutely did. Like,
he absolutely did. Yeah. If not for dooming the human race, like, Ellie and Dina, I think they're musing like pretty early in the game, like who would have wanted to do this to Joel? And Ellie just goes like, well, Joel did a lot of bad shit.
Yeah, and you're, the whole time you're playing through the whole game, I know they're just NPCs, but that's what I loved about the second one is the way they treat it, but I'll come back to that. But you're killing NPCs the whole time who are just trying to survive. So you're a murderous bugger, do you know what I mean?
You've kind of touched on one of my first points. No, I wouldn't say it's a point of contention, but it's something that I feel is a bit of... One of my issues with the game is I feel there's a bit of a dissonance between what you're doing and what the story's telling you should feel, and like what you actually feel. Like, for a start, the gameplay, I think, is a lot stronger this time around.
Totally.
I think
agreed.
Naughty Dog,
I agree.
Naughty Dog took it to heart when people were like, oh, it's just a movie you play through. And the guns felt weighty, like the Molotovs, the different ways you could dispatch people. And that's like one of my first issues is the killing is just so fucking fun. And Naughty Dog's like, you're gonna feel terrible for this. Like, I love dogs, massive dog person, but if a dog's coming at me and trying to kill me, I am gonna dispatch it. And when their friends are like, Derek, no, Tulip, no, I'm like, yes, Tulip's dead, and you're coming next. Like,
see, I had the opposite with that. Obviously,
did you feel what they wanted you to feel? I guess.
No, yeah, I felt I'm not a dog person. I've like, there's a joke in the film circles. With
maybe that's why.
I've been on set with, and as soon as a dog walks on set, like everyone drops tools and they're over playing with the dog, and I'm like, can we just get back to work, please? Like, it's just a dog. So there's this joke now in my circles that I hate dogs and want them all dead. So I kind of play up to it a little bit. I don't. I love animals, but playing Last of Us, like, you're killing these dogs, you feel a bit bad. But then that one you kill with Ellie, the iconic one, and then when you go back in as Abby, and you see it on the floor, you feel so gutted. Do you know what I mean? Because
do,
you
yeah.
know, and I'm like
Absolutely.
a dog disliker, and I felt gutted. Like, do you know what I mean?
Dislike it.
Well, but before we continue along this line, I'm curious if either of you played Spec Ops: The Line.
No.
No, James, did you play it?
Is this the one with? I'm not like a big first-person shooter fan at all, but I think I know where you're going with this. Go on.
Well, it's kind of B-rate third-person shooter that came out last gen, but it was really renowned in the kind of the wanky arty games journal media that they were like, this game's so clever because it's like it examines the idea that like violence in video games is meant to be fun and entertaining, and then the whole game, the whole message and the subtext of it, well, it's not even subtext, it's just text.
Just text.
You are a bad person for enjoying this. You are a fucking piece of shit. You've killed hundreds of people. You have blood on your hands. And with that game, I felt that it completely fell on deaf ears because, well, it's like, you're making me play. I bought the game. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, press F to white phosphorus hundreds of civilians. Like,
Yeah, that is what
by
I
the way,
was. That
Spec Ops
is-
spoilers, you know, like,
That is what I was thinking of. That controversy. Well, not controversy, but that kind of like that idea that
Yeah.
the game would trick you into being the bad guy. But obviously, Last of Us gives you both perspectives. It gives you Ellie's, who you're invested in, and then Abby's that you're not. And one of the things I really actually enjoyed about the game, which I know a lot of people didn't, is I liked Abby, and I really enjoyed sort of exploring where her storyline went. And I didn't think
Absolutely.
that she was evil, although I do kind of have an issue with the idea that like her act upon Joel was morally equivalent to Joel's act upon her father, which I'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, just as I liked Abby's sections for a start, and I thought she was really well written. I think Laura Bailey did an incredible job of really fleshing out that character, and that was a big risk as well, Naughty Dog, to
it was.
make you play as Joel's killer, the sad dad
The
hero.
pacing,
Totally.
the pacing slows to a crawl as well at that point as well. It takes a real while to like build up some momentum, so it's pretty bold. Of them,
As far as the game, I think there are pacing issues. As far as enjoyability, there are some really slow bits where you're kind of like, oh, okay. But I still kind of enjoyed, like, a lot of the time it was the slow bits that I actually really enjoyed, of just like wandering around and just exploring, which I'm, you know that I'm not a fan of open world games because I hate wandering around aimlessly. I want to be driven down a path, story-led, hammered through this story, cinematic. But in that game, I just loved the tranquility of just wandering around and stuff. And then as soon as you walk into a basement where there's some spores, I'm like, oh, really? I don't want to do this.
The pacing was something that I wanted to ask you about, Rich. Like, as a filmmaker and someone that like has to tell stories through film, which obviously The Last of Us is a very sort of cinematically driven game. I didn't have a problem with the storyline jumping around as it did, because it was almost like an Inception type situation where you had a flashback to one character and then a flashback within a flashback, which might have been a little bit hard to keep track of, but I didn't mind it.
It didn't bother me at all. I didn't have any issues.
Was there a flashback within a flashback?
I don't remember that.
Well,
remember.
yeah, I think they would like cut back to maybe like an early Abby sequence, and then a sort of mid-level Ellie sequence, and then back to a pre-Abby sequence, and it was a little bit like harder to keep track of. I don't mind that. I like Hoying on Hill House on Netflix, which I think is a fantastic series. That does the same kind of thing. It's very like unchronological and disjointed. My only issue was that, this is what I wanted to ask you about, Rich. Do you not feel that Naughty Dog, as sort of masters of narrative storytelling, could have maybe found a way to like weave these narratives together in something slightly more creative than just like 2 minutes of gameplay, cut to black? Then a little bit, it sort of felt like, all right, here are like a B-roll highlights of like, all right, these are all the things that we need to sort of put in the story. But sometimes it felt a little bit like they could have been married together in a more sort of coherent way.
It could have been totally. There were times when I was like, okay, this is cut here, right? Where am I now? I'm not quite sure, but I'm just going to go with it. There were bits like that. But I kind of just went with it. I kind of trusted them after they'd done Last of Us and obviously Uncharted and stuff. I've learned to really trust them. And
Jack and Daxter, let's not forget.
don't forget, I'm still waiting for that. I'm still waiting for that.
Of course.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it to me, it just felt right. It felt like this game had intention. There were some bits where I questioned it, but there's lots of top films that I absolutely love, where there's bits I question, but it's just a creative difference. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think it's great what they're doing, and it's. I wish there was more companies doing what they're doing. I don't know how. Don't know, like graphically, again, that's another thing. But graphically, I've never seen anything like it. Like I said, first time I started playing it, went through the snow, and then it cut back to going through the woods for the first time, and I was just like, do you know what? If I bought a PS5 and this was the first thing I played, and it looked like this, I wouldn't question it. I'd go.
I wouldn't be at all disappointed either. Absolutely.
The world and level design was just like a new benchmark. I actually thought like.
Yep.
I think obviously when you start playing it, it's very good looking, but we've seen woods and stuff before look really nice in games like Red Dead and stuff. I think the first time I sort of went, wow, like this is outstanding, is when you went to the museum or like the old arcades. And it's like, obviously you've been to museums and arcades. It never felt like a game's rendition of this place. It felt like everything down to like the signs on the toilet and like the way everything was like laid out. Like I was looking around it like an actual museum. But this is just...
Naughty Dog are the kings of the interior this gen. Like Uncharted 4, like the house at the end, the Drake household. Like just that whole section where you're looking around and you're like, this is a place. People live here.
Yeah.
And The Last of Us 2, like, again, absolute fucking masterclass.
I don't know how they've done it.
Any interior.
I have no idea how they've done it. And how
7 years of development.
Yeah, but you look at something like...
The amount of assets in this game.
But you look at something like Final Fantasy VII Remake, which has taken equally amount of time. and
Don't get me started.
And the textures are PS1 quality because something's gone wrong. And it's like, how can you get it so right and so wrong?
That game's a 10 out of 10, and... Last of Us 2 is 3.4 Metacritic or something ridiculous.
There's no excuse. There's no excuse when you've got Last of Us. Like I know they're the top of the top, but why can no one else hit that bar? Why can no one else come close to that bar?
I think Rockstar are pushing that bar. I think the only difference between Rockstar and Naughty Dog in terms of that detail is possibly the size of the Rockstar environments they've got to create. But I thought, Last of Us has the edge, but I think Rockstar are not too far behind in that.
It's tougher. I don't play a lot of Rockstar. I had a go at Red Dead. Again, I'm not a fan of the open world, and I tried it because I was like, I want to give it a go. I enjoyed the first Red Dead-ish, but I got bored. But yeah, the visuals were really nice, but then you can almost do apples to apples with Red Dead in the snow on a horse to Last of Us. But I totally know what you mean. It's an open world to a very narrow corridor kind of thing that you're following.
Well, less narrow this time though.
Less
we did have this
narrow,
sort of semi open world downtown Seattle, which I thought was a masterstroke. I loved that section.
Yeah.
Although I didn't get the achievement for like having explored all of it. There was one question mark left. I couldn't figure out. It was like sort of, as you would come in on the horse before you sort of got to the city. Right down at the end, there's like a bit where the sort of road gives way to like a just water, basically, a broken motorway. And I was stood right on everyone in the comments is probably just like, James, obviously it's this. But like, I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do in this area. But besides that, I went like into every nook and cranny of that environment.
So you saw the Take On Me guitar performance.
Oh yeah, that was genius. I loved that.
Oh my God, so good.
I actually think
the best animated hands in the industry, like that they actually animated guitar playing perfectly.
They did.
What the fuck?
I actually wrote down some chords that I was messing around with the in-game guitar thing, and I put some chords together, and I was like, they're really nice. I'm gonna use these for a chorus. And
you could actually use that as a writing tool, man. That's how good it is.
Did you see that someone had managed to play the whole of Nothing Else Matters on it?
I did. Well, I sort of recommended in the sidebar. I didn't click on it, but it doesn't surprise me.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's
amazing. And I'm like, because I don't know how he's done it, because he's done the single strings, because you tap on the touch bar in the right place and you hit the strings, but how where? Like, it's just like, that's mental. That would have taken so long.
You've got many like Dark Souls on like Dance Dance Revolution controllers, man. Of course you're going to have people doing, perfect renditions of popular songs in The Last of Us. Of course we are. Like,
and obviously they circle back to that at the end when they're just like, with one last sort of stab in the heart, they're like, and Ellie can't even play guitar now.
I thought that was incredibly inspired. It's just a piece of like both game design and narrative design, like kind of intertwining, like right at the end when it matters as well. And like you've had the whole, Joel, I'll teach you how to play guitar, Ellie, kind of thing, and then you get to play guitar in 2, and then at the end you're like, oh, I've fucked everything. I've lost 2 fingers. I can't play guitar anymore. I'm not gonna Tony Iommi this. Like, I'll just leave my guitar here symbolically to represent that I'm fucking broken inside. Like, oh.
Yeah, they really drove
my
that.
heart.
They really drove that point home as well about the like. There's no happy ending here.
I guess that was the bit that made me feel that I probably liked the least and kind of questioned the most narrative-wise was the last chapter of going back after her, because it's like everything that I guess the game was trying to tell had been told, and it was kind of, and we're going to tell you again in this last chapter, and it's like, okay, but I knew that, and it's just kind of, I don't get, I guess I might have missed that bit of the end fight and what it meant.
It's interesting.
Like,
sorry, go on, Gav.
Well, yeah, James, we spoke about this in our DMs, like, I don't know, like a week ago or something.
Yes.
And you were saying specifically that you kind of didn't really like how Tommy kind of comes and pulls Ellie kind of back into the shit, and that you felt like it was a bit out of character for him. I'm not going to address that point specifically, but more just like the overall trope of kind of coming back to like the idyllic farmland, like after the end. Red Dead 2. Spoilers-ish, Rich. There's like a 15-hour final act in Red Dead 2.
I love the end of Red Dead 2. It's total fan.
Absolutely.
Although it is total fan service, which The Last of Us is like the opposite of. Basically,
The Last of Us 2 is the exact opposite. Yeah.
They recreated the whole area of the first game in Red Dead 2, which is totally off limits to you throughout the whole game, and then you get to go back as John Marston and explore everything in like remastered detail. And they kept that totally under wraps. I was like, look at it, it looks so nice.
It's nuts.
That's that rock that I know. Look how nice that rock looks.
It's very much like a Western trope. And like, of course, The Last of Us is like, it's like steeped in Americana. You know, I don't think you can really do a reading of The Last of Us that is like devoid of, you know, Americana and American pop culture. So I think like the fact that there's, obviously, you know, you've got like the whole deep like Cormac McCarthy kind of referencing going on, but also I think there's the spirit of the Western in there somewhere as well. Westerns have a lot of revenge fantasies and you know, pontificating on ethics and morals in a world that's kind of you know, too crazy and all this kind of shit. You know, a dying land, you know, like the last gasp of the American frontier, and then The Last of Us kind of evokes that in ways with that whole sequence where you're at the idyllic farmland and you get pulled in for one last fit of vengeance. And I think the act kind of started a bit slow myself, but by the end of it, I was in. Yeah.
My issues with the ending sort of tie more into my issues with the game. Well, my biggest point about the game, I would say, and this is one of the points that somebody else said, and I went, actually, yeah, that's so true. Well, to me anyway, I felt like, going back to the pacing, the way it's kind of cut up, I'm not necessarily objecting to the way that sort of things pan out, but I don't like the fact that a lot of things seem to be skipped over in this sort of like jumping about. Like, for instance, we were talking about Tommy, Joel's brother, who in the middle of the game he's always the pragmatic one, he's the chill one, he's the more level-headed. He recognizes that Dina being pregnant is more important than their vengeance. They've already killed lots of the WRF members, and he says, you know, we're gonna call it here, Ellie. And Ellie's like, you know, so what? Abby gets to live, and he's like, yeah, this is how it is. And he recognizes that, and then at the end of the game, he storms into Ellie's idyllic house with her baby that he was the one that, you know, Dina was sent home for to give birth to, and he's like, nah, fuck all this off, mate. You know, we're going after Abby. I can't do it. You're going. And it's like, maybe that would have been justified if we'd perhaps seen the middle sections of that, or like how Tommy got to be in that position.
It's tropey for sure. It's very tropey. But in that, I feel like a lot of narrative writing is often about like, as a writer, you're kind of playing this omniscient chess master, and it's like, how can I create a situation for characters to be kind of where I want them to be? But then I suppose that kind of flies in the face of The Last of Us's kind of writing style, which is where people act like very naturalistically, and they don't just do things that like an omniscient writer kind of wants them to do. They do what they want to do as people. So I see your point.
It's not so much that I don't think that there's a justification for Tommy to have acted like that. Like, maybe there is. You know, he's blind. His missus has left him. I'm sure that sours your worldview to an extent. my only problem is I feel, and this is what someone said, this is the point I was trying to get to. Obviously, The Last of Us is about Ellie and Joel at the core of it, and a lot of their narrative is told fairly briefly through flashbacks, and I actually think that they're some of the best bits of the game, those moments between Ellie and Joel. The Last of Us 2 almost feels like The Last of Us 3. So there was The Last of Us 2, and that could have been a game where you see all those things play out in real time, or to some degree, what happens between Ellie and Joel, how they go from being very close to Ellie starts sort of suspecting that something might have been wrong, to her challenging him, and then Joel sort of winning back that affection, and then sort of cutting off at the point, maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe cutting off at the point where Joel dies, and that could be the end of Last of Us 2, and then Last of Us 3 is Ellie's revenge mission. But because it's compiled into this game, not that I object to spending time with Abby, I like Abby, and I like seeing all the storyline, but it feels like some of the really important beats are kind of glossed over a little bit, or sort of moved out of the way to give space for the characters surrounding them. And maybe the reaction from people would have been more positive if they could have seen how everybody got to this position, rather than it just kind of been alluded to or sort of shown in flashbacks.
I guess so, but I don't know whether the point that Neil wanted to put across would have been the same. Again, I think you're coming in from what we would have wanted, and he didn't want to give you what you wanted, and I don't think he even really wanted to make Last of Us 2. I think it was probably pressure, but there, because as soon as I finished Last of Us 1, I said, I hope they never make another game of this.
I agree.
Do you know what I mean?
I said in my review, I don't think it needed a sequel, but we've got one here anyway.
And he said after this, he doesn't want to return. And so I think there was probably pressure to make this. So he was like, okay, then how do we tell something different? I thought if they do make a Last of Us 2, it shouldn't have Joel and Ellie in it at all. It should be... Or if it does, it should be maybe retelling the first one, but from someone else's perspective. So maybe one of the characters that bumps into them along the way, and
like Abby,
something like that. Or do you know what I mean? Where it's telling the same story, but there's some characters I can't remember, such a long time ago. But there's some characters that bump into them now and again through the whole story. But you're playing it almost the game same timeline as the first one, but. You meet them along the way now and again. Might have been a different way, but I felt like their story was done, and I kind of liked that he almost said, he's almost done that. Their story is done. The story is done of their characters pretty much at the beginning of Last of Us 2, and it's just this revenge and the descent into madness for Ellie, and I think
that's a fair point.
I think that the main, the other thing I wanted to highlight is lots of people I've seen in the reviews are saying that there's no repercussion for Abby for what she did. No one cares about what she did.
No, I think that's just not true at all.
Yeah, I don't think it's true either. Yeah.
People are saying, how come it's okay for her to kill Joel, but wrong for Ellie to get her revenge? And it's like, it's not, because every character,
more than anybody.
Every single character in that game that tries to get revenge reaps the repercussions. They lose everyone they love, and do you know what I mean?
Yes. Because Abby kills Joel, that sets Ellie off to go and kill all of Abby's friends, and then all of Abby's friends are dead. And then she's
we
like,
find it in a concentration camp at the end, literally begging to die.
Yeah. Did you notice that, she's buff the whole game, but then her arms are noticeably skinnier at the end?
I couldn't even recognise her. Her face looked so different.
Yeah.
I was clicking on the wrong person hanging up, because I was like, I'm sure that's Abby. That's definitely not, because she looks so different.
How did they get them up there?
I just wanted to get my 2 cents in on the... did it need a sequel thing? I'm kind of in the camp where I was like, I would love more of this, but at the same time, I didn't really care if we got more or not. But I would have happily taken it. I mean, either way. So I would have taken anything. I will take kind of anything that Neil Druckmann kind of has to give.
Same.
But from what I've noticed in kind of interviews with Neil, he said that when they started thinking about The Last of Us 2, it wasn't that he didn't want to do it at all. It was that he wanted to make sure it was going to be kind of true to the characters, and that he could do the characters kind of justice. And I've already seen him saying
I'm not sure
we're
they
thinking
did
about
that, though.
maybe doing.
I'm not entirely sure that's what they achieved personally, or maybe it is, but I'm not sure it was presented the best way for me.
I mean, I keep coming back to this whole thing of like people kind of wanting fan service for The Last of Us 1. Like, you know, Rich was saying, oh, it could be really interesting to see like the same events from a different perspective. And it's like, it could be, but then I almost feel like that would just be
totally
kind of giving into that fan
I
service
agree.
sort of thing.
I agree. But
We
what
were-
I didn't
we were
want was the
talking
same
about,
characters, but I think we got something that was the same characters but different in that way. I think
Yes.
Sorry, I was just going to say, do you not feel that maybe, obviously Neil Druckmann was pretty aware that he didn't want to just deliver this sort of tropey, cliche, the good guys win kind of story. I feel possibly, and through most aspects of the game, it's really hammering home some of these points and trying to make you feel bad. Like it's not a pleasant experience a lot of the time because of the story. I almost feel maybe he felt a pressure to sort of push things so far the opposite way that it's resulted in a lot of alienation from fans, and maybe there could have been a way to tell this story as is, but possibly in a more conjoined way, and possibly show some of the transitions between them and sort of have it feel less like Whiplash, which I feel like it does at times. You just kind of like, whoa, this has happened, and now this person's dead, and now this person, like, nothing's happy for anyone. I
don't know. I think there's a mix. I think there's a mix of those quick moments where you're like, oh my gosh, but there's also that long dread of what's going to happen, but you've got to play through it. Like that moment at the like when you finally get to Abby's chapter before the final thing. You finally get to where you're approaching the theatre and you know exactly what you've got to do, but you're controlling it. And I loved that. I kind of felt, I'm so glad they've gone this direction. As much as I love Ellie, I feel so justified in going in there and beating the crap out of her in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
dude,
felt like
the boss fight with Ellie.
Yeah.
Like, you know, obviously when Joel dies, when you're playing as Ellie, you want blood.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the fact that a lot of the fans just hated the fact that Joel died.
I thought that was fine. I've got no problems with that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot
it was
of the
almost
fans were
inevitable.
just like, Neil said that like he wanted the fans to hate Abby because then you kind of role play into Ellie's role and you are going around being bloodthirsty. Like I know I was.
Yeah.
I was killing the shit out of those wolves.
Yeah.
And then when I got to the theater as Abby, I wanted to kill the shit out of Ellie.
Yeah.
And
no,
I
I
was
agree.
like, oh wait, no, that's awful. Oh god. Oh god.
Yeah, it worked. He set out to do something, and like it or not like it, it worked. I think everyone I've spoken to has had that emotion.
I've
That
seen
switch.
both sides of this. Another thing that I've sort of been reflecting on, coming back to this point of like seeing it from both sides kind of thing. On the surface, it does kind of seem like Ellie and Abby are two sides of the same coin. They both had their fathers taken away from them in what they perceive as like an unjust scenario. And then the game's like, hey, look, these guys are exactly the same with exactly the same kind of motivations. I'm not sure when you examine it, that's entirely true. So from Joel's perspective, he doesn't kill the Doctor in cold blood. He kills him because he's going to kill his fucking, his daughter figure. And the Fireflies, they don't consult Ellie. They don't ask her if this is what she wants. They don't consult Joel. They don't say, listen, this is how it has to be. And Ellie goes, okay. And then she explains to Joel, this is what she wants. And those two have a chance to make amends before she dies.
I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. Like, the fact that there was no consent involved in that section of The Last of Us 1. Like, no one asks Ellie, do you want this?
They couldn't, though.
By all rights, it seems like she would have said yes.
Yeah, but they couldn't. They couldn't.
It's difficult.
Can I have your permission to end the suffering of the world? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but Ellie would have said yes.
Yeah, but that's a risk they probably couldn't take.
Well, she's got survivor's guilt as well. She like actively kind of has a death wish as the result of being a survivor.
Which is why she should have walked up to the gates of that Firefly camp at the end of this game. That's my one.
That would have been lovely.
She should have done.
I agree. I do feel like...
I know it would have been a nice bow, and he doesn't like bows, but I think...
Yeah.
The method in which Joel kills her dad is a split-second sort of knee-jerk reaction. He's gone through with Ellie this whole journey. He feels very protective over her. Suddenly, instantly finds out his family member, someone that he loves, is going to be killed. I feel like a lot of us can empathise with the idea that, no, we're going to snatch her away and get her out of there. However, Abby, ultimately, this is someone that wanted to kill his daughter, whether it was for the right reasons or not, or like his daughter figure. However, Abby is so hell-bent on revenge, and she plots this for years and years. She's consumed by it. And not only does she kill Joel in a much more brutal fashion than Joel kills her dad, but she does it in front of Ellie while completely ignoring her request to not do it or just to end his suffering in some other way. She beats him with a fucking golf bat. So it's like, obviously, if that was my dad and I was in that scenario, you probably wouldn't see sense in that reason. But I'm not sure if you look at it in black and white that Ellie and Abby,
I don't think it's just about
Ellie and Joel are the same.
But it's everything.
Abby and Joel are the same.
I mean, it's an element of it for sure, but like also, they were fireflies. Like they wanted the cure for the infection. They wanted to cure mankind and kind of take things back to the way things were. So Joel killing her dad isn't just about killing her dad. It's about like killing mankind.
It's a maybe though. There is no guarantee cure.
It is a maybe. It's not a guarantee.
They may have harvested Ellie and gone, shit, we've just killed a fucking 11-year-old, how old she is, and we've got no cure now, and like your daughter's dead for nothing. Sorry. Like, do you know what I mean? It feels...
I think that was a thing that they kind of vaguely retconned a little bit in The Last of Us 2, because I feel like I remember, I might be wrong, because it's been a good few years since I've played the first one. But I feel like there was a seed of doubt about the potential for the cure from Ellie, and then like The Last of Us 2 is like, oh yeah, we're pretty sure that it would have cured everything, just, kind of for their narrative purposes, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's not really touched on.
But I don't think it has to be, like you said, apples to apples. Like, well, this has, this slight scenario which makes her more justified. I think they're both justified in their reasoning, which is the point. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not about more or less, is it? They're both just traumatized. Yeah. They're both just in pain, and they're acting how they act for their own kind of sets of reasons.
I'm just saying that although I was somebody that liked Abby and empathized with her towards the end, I know I've seen a lot of feedback where people say they hated her and they hated her throughout, and it's like...
But I
can see why they may think that the two are not the same, and they would have more hatred for one character. And if the game is trying to make you see them as equals and trying to get you to, because I couldn't pick at the end, I like them both, but I think a lot of people carried that, the method of which she killed Joel, the brutality of it, and the lack of justification as compared with Joel, perhaps. I think they carried that through all of Abby's section, and as a result, hated half the game.
I think it's kind of part of the message of the game, isn't it? That it's like an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. So if you're like, we're trying to use a kind of apples to apples like metric.
It's kind of like an eye for an eye and a bit of your ear.
Trauma comparisons. We like in real life when we talk about like mental health, which a lot of this game is ostensibly about mental health. It's about trauma, right? And the ways that people react to it. We don't go around like, oh, I'm more depressed than you. Like maybe some fucking toxic assholes do, but otherwise the rest of us are just like, you're fucking suffering. You're suffering. I don't want any of you to suffer, and people are just kind of acting out in the way that they.
And I also think that as the story goes on, Abby is a lot better than Ellie. Like she's a lot more forgiving, whereas Ellie's like stabbing up pregnant women. Right. Do you know what I mean? Like
she is, yeah.
Well, let's not forget at the end.
She has the biggest.
I was going to say, let's not forget at the end. Ellie says to Abby she's pregnant, and Abby looks her straight in the face and says, good. It's only because Liv intervenes that she actually doesn't stab a pregnant woman. Sorry.
Again, it's that thing of them. They're both seeing the justification in their eyes. Like these are people that she loves as her friends, and she's seen Ellie do it so callously and just murder everyone. And then she's like, oh no, but she's pregnant. It's like, well, good. Do you know what I mean? Like that's kind of the reaction I would have. Do you know what I mean?
She's just ready to hurt. This leads to another interesting point, like the parallel between Abby and Lev and Joel and Ellie. Like in the first game, Ellie is kind of this stand-in for like the idea of like childlike wonder and purity in a dying world, and Lev is kind of the same, which I think is a really well done like parallel. Like Lev is the kind of childlike voice of reason through the entire game. Obviously, Lev isn't like completely pure. He's been raised in the Seraphites, but
he's only like 13 or something though, let's be fair.
Yeah, something like that. Ellie's 14 in the first game, Lev's like 12, 13, something like that.
Yes, I like the Seraphites as well as a sort of, because a lot of it's morally ambiguous, but it felt like they were the group that Neil Druckmann was just like, no, fuck it, these guys are going to be pure evil. Like, you will not empathize.
The Seraphites?
Yeah, the Seraphites. You're not going to empathize with these guys. They're just fucking pieces of shit. Like,
honestly.
Cannon fodder. You need some cannon fodder.
Yeah, you do need some mindless goons to just take down.
I guess so. One of my favorite sections of the whole game actually was when you visit the Seraphites island as Abby. And of course, like, while the Seraphites are doing some like truly like awful shit in the name of God. And not even a real God, like some fucking false prophet as well that you never even get to see. It's like the aftermath of a shitty false prophet. But man, when I was going around the island and like looking at their dwellings and kind of reading the notes and their like kind of prayers unto their prophet, I was just like, man, if they were just like a bit nicer about
A bit
all of this shit.
nicer. They
A
strung
bit
people
nicer.
up
Yeah,
by
but
their
look
necks
at
and
Lev.
cut out
Look-
their guts.
Well, what I loved about it was they didn't try and like Neil said he tried to tread carefully with like religion and stuff like that. Like that was a bad religion, but you had Lev who was obviously a member of them, and as he was going through, even though he's left them and they're being horrible and he's happy to kill them, he's still stopping at these totems and giving like his glory or whatever type of thing, and just showing, well, it's not necessarily the belief it's bad, you can be a good person.
His relationship with God is his relationship with God, so to speak, and it's not about the kind of institution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
and that-
I thought it was good.
And then just the fact that, like, you know, you may not like the Seraphites, but when the wolves come in and start literally fucking genociding them, I have to admit I was like a bit more on side with them after that. I was like, man, I don't like the wolves, I don't like the Seraphites, but no one deserves to be fucking genocided for their beliefs and their ideas. Like,
That
I know,
was-
but
this is
were they
fucked up.
were they genocided for their beliefs or ideas, or were they genocided because every time the Seraphites had come across a wolf, they were hung by their necks and they strung out their organs all over the floor,
Yeah. Well,
there's
regardless
that
of who they were? I think
There's that.
if you want to talk about justification, you can see why they were pissed.
That was one bit I
Sure,
couldn't
of course.
quite get on with Abby, though, is like she turned on a coin against her own people, and like that was a bit like, you know, Star Wars Episode
Yeah.
3 when he's like, I would never, you know, I'm not evil, and then just turn to the dark side. And
All
he's
of a
like,
sudden
all
he's killing
right,
children.
yeah, let's kill all the kids.
I actually liked Owen's sort of moral ambiguity a bit more, because he was kind of his heart wasn't fully in the WLF.
Yeah.
So maybe if Abby had sort of come more over to that side of thinking, or like visibly sort of been more questioning of things that were going on, that turn at the end might have been a bit more believable. Also, I kind
Well,
of,
if it wasn't. Sorry, go on, James.
I was just going to
Finish
say,
your
also,
point.
I would have liked to see more of the when the dude who was like the head of the WLF was sort of introduced. I was
Isaac,
like,
yeah.
I was like, oh, cool, we got like a proper villain now. We've got the, like one on one side, and it's like, yeah, we can kind of see where you're coming from. Here's a dude that is clearly a fucking arsehole. Like, I was like, this is setting up for some awesome kind of like they unite. Maybe that's a bit cheesy, but you know what I mean? There was like here's a villain, but he just kind of filtered out like a sort of wet fart and didn't really.
And then he's unceremoniously gunned down
Bang!
in seconds.
Oh,
Yeah,
I guess that's
yeah.
over.
Well, I was about to say, kind of regarding Isaac and stuff, like he's, you know, the big cheese of the WLF, and you know, the WLF and the Seraphites, something that binds both of them is that they're incredibly, you know, tribalistic
Yeah, I was about to say
societies.
that.
You know, they're locked together in this whole thing of being enemies, and it's like they've had numerous attempts at treaties and stuff. And while the WLF don't string people up and gut them, I mean, the WLF are doing some pretty nasty shit as well. They're not all like kind of good and nice. Like, I don't think either camp deserves to be fucking genocided for who and what they are. It's just, it's part of the overall kind of human tragedy that The Last of Us is so amazing at getting across, which is that like everyone's fucked. Everyone just acts like humans. Like, I think that's kind of how it would be. Like, you've got this militarized society, and then you've got a crazy fucking religious cult, and they try and have truces and treaties and stuff, and it just doesn't fucking work. And then one day, someone fucking snaps, and they decide to genocide the other one. And that whole thing where the WLF and the Seraphites are clashing, like, maybe I'm not, like, kind of weeping for the Seraphites any more than I'm weeping for the WLF. I'm just weeping for the fucking tragedy of the whole thing. It's just awful.
Yeah.
That was my feeling playing through that section. Like, this is just terrible. This is awful what's happening
game,
right now.
to be fair.
Yeah,
It's
but
just
that
awful.
section in particular really, really stuck with me. Like, just watching that island be on fire, I was like, man, this is just terrible. It really is.
I guess one thing we've got to cover, because it's been part of this, and I do think it's part of a lot of the negativity where it's not quite
the discourse.
it's the
That's
kind
one way to
of
put it.
the political take on it, as far as like left wing, right wing kind of stuff.
Total non-issue.
Do you know what I mean?
Total non-issue for me. I thought
Totally
that
with
was
me as well, and
just completely blown out of proportion.
Same.
But like I've seen arguments saying, "Oh, they only killed Joel off because he's a man, and like they just want the women." And I'm just like, that is like so far from the truth. It's just like
that sounds more like their preconceptions rather than anything the game's trying to say.
That sounds like a massive dose of projection on my part.
Yeah, well, they were saying, that Abby's trans and stuff. It's like, have you even played the game like before you kind
right? Yeah, no, exactly. Like everyone's losing their shit over Abby being like more masculine than most dudes, and then they actually like don't even notice the actual trans character who is there.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, they handled that really beautifully. Obviously, I'm not trans, so like I'm not the premier voice to be speaking on this, but I am queer, so I just feel in terms of giving my 2 cents, like the scene where you're in the kind of skyscraper going up to the sky bridge with Lev,
Yes,
and you come across a bunch of Seraphites, and they're like Lily, and they dead name Lev. And I like that Abby's like, or I think it's Lev that initiates it. Either way, one of them's like, "Do you want to ask me about that?" And Abby's
Lev.
like,
"It's Lev that asked that to Abby."
Yeah. So Lev's like, "Do you want to ask me about that?" And Abby's like, "No." And then she goes, "Did you want me to ask you about that?" And Lev just goes, "Nah." And they just never address it ever again. Yeah. Abby just continues referring to Lev as he and using Lev's like name that he's chosen for himself and respecting him for who he is. And I'm like, fuck yes. That is the kind of representation I want, where it's not fucking trumpets. I'm gay. I'm trans. It's like, there's none of that.
And
Same for
I
Ellie
think
and
that
Dina.
was done with taste, you know what I mean? It wasn't
Absolutely.
like most of the time when you've got homosexual people in film, especially with women, it's kind of done in a titillating way that's kind of there to entertain the straight people. Do you know what I mean? It's not, because I don't think any of the characters, I could be wrong in saying this, but like I don't think any of the characters in The Last of Us are particularly overwhelmingly attractive, and I think that's great that they're kind of chosen quite raw.
A damning indictment of the game,
I mean?
Richard. Not enough sexy people.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I love. Is there's a realness. Do you know what I mean? It's not Lara Croft. It's like
Joel's pretty dashing, I'd say. He's a good-looking.
Joel's a very handsome dude.
He's a handsome guy.
I mean, old Dave Mack would probably be fucking moistening himself over him. Yeah, but anyway. You were saying about the whole like not conventionally attractive thing. Like the E3 demo years ago, it used that scene that is now like right at the end of the game where they're at like the dance together. Yeah. And Dina's like, "How much do I stink right now?" And then she like rubs her greasy face against Ellie's cheek, and you see like the fucking oil like shining on that exact spot. And I'm just like, fuck, that's so great. They're not like lipstick lesbians.
That's
they're just
what I mean. Like, that's what I loved, was that
greasy
kind of thing.
Fucking redneck post-apocalypse lesbians, and they're just having a nice time together. That's great.
Yeah, no, I thought that was good.
I think something the game suffered from when it comes to this issue and just in general was obviously the story was leaked by. I can't remember if it was like an ex-employee or they were just hacked. I think it might have been they were just hacked.
It was found to not be an ex-employee and that it was just a hack, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the story leaked. Some of it was inaccurate and obviously all of it was not in context of the game. And I just wonder if... Obviously, these leaks would have shown there's a trans character, there's a gay character. So I felt like...
Did you read the leaks, James, before the game?
Absolutely not. I watched the discourse, but I wanted to stay away from it. But I watched...
Have you seen the actual... what the content of those leaks was since? Because I haven't myself, so I don't know what the inaccuracies are.
No, but I've heard that... Well, I know that for a start, Naughty Dog put out fake clips of the game in the trailers. So if you notice that... Jesse says, you think I'd let you do this on your own, and he comes...
And
but in the trailer, that's Joel. Yeah. So obviously they were setting themselves up to piss some people off there, so obviously there was going to be a bit of backlash.
I mean, we live in a post-Metal Gear Solid 2 world.
Of course, and that's obviously...
that was fucking 15 odd years ago, and people are like, you false marketing. Shut the fuck up, man.
One of the things I think the game did suffer from, not for me because I didn't see the leaks, but from what I've seen of like the really negative reaction to it, is a lot of people heard the story in bullet points as like, here's what happens. And I mean, most things, if you reduce them down to just but like God of War, you climb a mountain. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like without seeing the context of the game, I think a lot of assumptions were made on it. And then when the game came out and some people did play it and had a negative opinion, I think it's fueled... I think there's a large group of people basically that have not played the game that think they know what the story is about and think that it has an agenda, but actually don't realise that it's not. there are issues with it in my view, but like these are not the same like issues. And I think it's so like the game had sort of 40,000 like 1s out of 10s on Metacritic within 2 hours.
It got review bombed.
Yeah, but it's a 25-hour game and it was out for 2 hours,
if not longer.
So,
I finished it in 30. Like, it's a long fucking game.
Yeah, so that's obviously a lot of people who have not played it, who think they understand the story and have got an opinion about it. And I wonder what the reaction to this game would have been like if there weren't any leaks and everybody experienced it at the same time, like just through playing it.
I think it probably would have been a lot kinder.
Yeah,
like there seems to be just a lot of controversy surrounding the launch of this game, you know, with the delays, and then in that period of delay, they had the leak and they had the whole the crunch thing, you know, and like that's not already a part of the culture, you know, like, but Naughty Dog kind of became the poster child for crunch for the discourse in this period. So kind of, I feel like people kind of got it in their heads between those two kind of elements that, like, you know, Joel dead, story bad, Naughty Dog evil kind of thing, like
agendas.
Agendas, yeah. Oh, the woke SJW liberals. Oh no, like I think if people had played it kind of as intended, without any kind of bullshit surrounding it, I feel like maybe it would have been kinder and more well received. But you know, it's
I don't think the critic scores helped it, because while I think there is a case for it to be made that it is a masterpiece, certainly in like terms of technicality, its level design, there's a lot about it that is, you know, in that next level.
Oh yeah, I think
a 10 out of 10
9 across the board is pretty well deserved. Yeah,
yeah. Well, it was more 10 out of 10s than that. It was all 10 out of 10s. So I think people like, it's almost like we root for an underdog, don't we? Especially for British, which obviously we all are. And it's like when you can see something getting absolutely universally acclaimed, then there's almost you go in going like, all right, well, you know, impress me, that kind of thing. And I almost feel like that kind of worked against it in the end a little bit.
I mean, as I've gotten older in general, I feel like I've become kind of less edgy about stuff, you know, that is like popular being bad. Like now I kind of realize more often than not that stuff that gets rated highly usually is just fucking good.
It depends.
The cream does rise to the top. Critics and people that are paid to write about media tend to know a bit more about media than your average punter, and thus
always.
they give a more
Last Jedi was not a 9 out of 10 film.
I think sometimes they get it wrong. I think
sure.
Days Gone for me was like a turning point where I thought I really lost faith in reviewers, which is ironic because obviously I'm reviewing for a gaming magazine.
Well, that got a lot of kind of 6s and 7s, didn't it?
From the reviews, it was almost the inverse of The Last of Us. Rich, have you played Days Gone?
No, I heard off of people after the fact that it was bad, and it's kind of open world again, isn't it? So it kind of didn't.
Yeah, you might not like it if it is very open world tropesy, but it's IGN gave it like a 6, GameSpot gave it like a 6 or a 7. And then the user reviews came out and it was getting like 8.5s, 9s. And like, I know a lot of people whose favourite game this is. It was my game of the year. I absolutely loved my time with Days Gone.
Really?
It was very buggy. It was kind of broken. But like underneath that, there was good Sony story there with like top quality acting, great world design. And at that point, I just kind of thought like, I don't know. I was like listening to the critical feedback saying it's a boring world. There's nothing to it. It's like dull. It's empty. And I was just like, I am not having that experience with this game. I sort of lost a little bit of faith in the media cycle as it is.
I feel like reviews in games, they still have this problem where they're kind of contained to the 7 to 9 score bubble.
Yes.
Like, we don't really operate on a kind of
true.
10-point scale in gaming, right? It's still all kind of a 7 is a bad game, a 9 is a masterpiece. And then you get the occasional 10, and those like mythic fucking proportions. Whereas like, to me, a 6 out of 10, man, I'll fucking play that. I'm actually planning on buying Days Gone soon, James, because I'm kind of curious to finally see what the fuss is about. I figure it will have got some patches. And
if you like Naughty Dog style games, like, and you enjoy stuff like Red Dead 2, it's a great game.
Yeah,
Outstanding game.
I mean, it's got motorbikes, it's got zombies, it's got open worlds.
Yes,
I'll probably like it.
It's not a zombie game though. This was like another thing that people. Sorry to get like off topic a little bit.
Like The Last of Us 2. Yeah,
it's as much a zombie game as. In fact, The Last of Us 2 is probably more a zombie game because the cordyceps is actually quite central to the story. Obviously, with Ellie being immune.
Sure.
But the zombies are really just like a backdrop for a post-apocalypse sort of human tale. It's the moment-to-moment, the story, the human relations that are the centre of it.
I think that's a really good point, that as far as like Naughty Dog and what they do compared to other games is it's not you're a character in this world and deal with it, and you just run around and okay, there's zombies coming, hit them and stuff. It's not about that thing. It's about the world is completely just a backdrop for the human stories, which is what you don't get a lot. And it's good that you're saying that Days Gone is like that, but it's the same with film. There's so many people that now that CGI has become almost anything you want, they're just like, what worlds can we build and what worlds can we make and just look amazing? And it's like, yeah, but they're all crap because nobody cares about the stories. They don't stop
to think about whether they should just because they can, right?
Totally agree.
The best films in the world are the ones where you've got an intimate story that's following characters, very character-led, and the world can be whatever you want. And the cooler the world, the better, but you've got to focus on the intimate stories, which is why I think stuff like Quiet Place is one of my favourite films in the last
great film.
Last 10 years or something, because it's just this intimate story about family. The monsters are kind of neither here nor there. Like, it's just the world that they're in, and I love that. And that's the reason why Godzilla is so bad, is because you don't even know who the main character is, because it changes every 5 minutes, and then you're off here with the army, and then you're over there, and you don't know what you're doing. You're just moving around this world with stuff happening. And
I mean, that bit where Godzilla fired his lasers down that other one's neck was pretty fucking cool, though, let's be honest, right?
That's a set piece, but as far as a story, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
I thought one thing that this game did really well, speaking of zombies are a pretty overdone trope, and I've never really felt scared of a zombie in a game because they're just such cannon fodder all the time.
Yeah.
The Last of Us gave me some proper terrifying, this game, the 2 and the first one, but definitely more with this one, gave me some proper terrifying, genuine fear of like the boss battles, and then the first boss battle with the bloater, with Joel and Ellie, where you're just running around this tiny cramped space going, and it's like, I've got 7 medipacks, but I don't have 30 seconds to heal myself, you know what I mean? Like, it's right behind you, and it's going to fuck you up.
I did find the bloaters in number 2 a lot easier.
Did you? Well, you had it on easy though, Rich.
But I had the first one on easy.
Well, on that subject, I played through both games on hard. I have done like super hard runs of The Last of Us 1 since then, but like I feel like hard is like the kind of medium for The Last of Us, just with like how they balance the game and so on and so forth. And in The Last of Us 1, in any kind of boss battle-esque segments, like the bloater fight in the first one, when you start running out of ammo, they send in a new wave of runners that conveniently drop shitloads of ammo for you again. And then The Last of Us 2, all the kind of boss fights in The Last of Us 2, they hide that they're doing that like 1,000 times better.
Yeah.
It's so much more well done. And James, the just again talking about like how scary the zombies are in 2. Abby has some really amazing fights with the infected. I felt for Ellie's segment of the game that it was more about the humans and that the infected just like weren't really a big deal anymore. And then playing as Abby, like the bit in the house where Lev and Yara are going to like, try and like get a car. They're trying to let you out. And you're just in that tiny fucking building.
The Ground
Zero boss fight. And then when you're going down... the Ground Zero boss fight, man. That was
boss fight was
scary.
ridiculously
That was so
good.
Resident Evil.
It was brilliant.
My God.
And the skyscraper where you're just slowly working your way down into the bowels was...
That was one of my favourite sections of the game, like gameplay-wise.
Yeah, it was so good.
Absolutely.
I also hate heights, so the bridge bit knocked me sick. Really didn't like that at all.
Really?
I was just sat there going, I know
should do it
100% I could not do this if this was real.
Was it just me, or like when you looked down as Abby, did the camera actually do like a different kind of thing to if you look down as Ellie? Because I feel like it did. I mean, to like simulate the vertigo.
Rich will know this trick, but when you zoom out at the same time as moving the camera closer to something, you get that weird look, right? And I swear they did a little bit of that.
I feel like they were doing that as Abby, like that bit when you were crossing.
And Abby
the
would be like,
was...
any time in the game, even outside of the set piece moments, if you ever put Abby near a ledge, she'd be like,
and you look down,
don't like this.
But I think the difficulty difference between the bosses, between the infected, between Abby and Ellie was intentional, because obviously Ellie had a pocket knife and you had to create shivs with Abby and stuff. So I think that was intentional. I think you were meant to find them quite easy with Ellie because you've maybe because you've done that for a game before, but I guess everyone has story-wise. Do you know what I mean?
I also really appreciated the flexibility of the difficulty. I think it's quite a bold move for a game to be like, listen, we've balanced this a certain way, But if you want to go in and just like fucking change everything, like down to the degree, you can do that. You can have the enemies more like aggressive, less aggressive. You can have more drops, less drops. You can have like characters bother you less or more.
Shout out to
just everything on zero is good for me.
Rich is like very mild, very mild, very mild, very mild.
Well, I'm not a hardcore gamer. I like story.
Then...
I like story.
At some point, I think it was at Ground Zero. Actually, funnily enough, I put a few of the options up to the maximum, but not all of them. I was like, oh, actually, I don't really want like less resources because I feel like I'm already scraping by the skin of my teeth, but I'm going to play with like enemies taking a few more shots to down. And I kind of felt like it was ruining the pacing of my playthrough a bit. So I just put it back down to like hard kind of all the way. But I love that they've got the modularity in the kind of difficulty options there. That's just fantastic. And all the accessibility options, like,
yeah, they're brilliant.
Just opening up the play field for like everyone.
High contrast mode is hilarious. It makes your
I haven't even tried it.
Oh, so it makes everything grey apart from item drops are like bright yellow, and and enemies are like bright red, and then you can send out signals which will show you sort of the location of enemies. So it's like
that's for like people that are like really like visually impaired, right?
Super,
like, I mean, both of us wear glasses, you know, so we're you know, we're all right. Like, oh shit!
I heard someone completed it, and they were blind.
Really?
Wow. Yeah.
That's fucking amazing.
Completely blind.
Yeah, well, I know a friend of mine made a film, which was a documentary about a guy who plays video games and he's blind, and he's completed all the Final Fantasies. And so maybe it was him, because he's just a massive buff. And I don't know how it works. I've got no idea how that works, but apparently he completed The Last of Us 2 blind. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if that's true, but even if it isn't true, it's like a testament to the sound design in this game was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, I don't usually wear earphones for games. I don't know why. Like, I'm a music buff, and I should. But this game I played, like, for games I really care about, I play with my earphones on. And wow, like the sound design, and like down to like when you were walking in the rain, which obviously there's quite a lot of. It's like you can hear the rain like hitting the roof of the car, but then like maybe on the bonnet it would have a different sound to maybe like the back of the car, or like if it's hitting against the window. And then not only that, but it's positional, so depending on where you are in relation to that sound, it sounds different.
Well, they're saying the PS5's like quadrupling down on that effect of
they've got actual a chip for 3D audio alone.
Yeah, isn't it like the power that chip alone is like the power of a PS4 or something they were saying? I can't remember, but it was mental.
I think it's about the power of a PS3.
Yeah, maybe it was that, but it was crazy,
then.
Like crazy, just for the sound of like rain and stuff. Mental.
Yeah. I mean, I only played the Ground Zero section with headphones on.
That was the worst bit with headphones. That was the scariest part.
It was fucking terrifying. I play on like it's like a floor standing hi-fi thing with then like some little bookshelf hi-fi speakers on top, and that's just running through like a hi-fi amp. But I moved my PS4 upstairs one day because I wanted to play some in the daytime, and my little sisters are like 8 and 9, so I can't be playing that shit in front of them, you know.
They need to learn. The world is an unkind place.
They need to learn, but man, like they're having to deal with like Boris and Brexit and Black Lives Matter, and I'm like, you know what? They can go without the zombie neck slicing for another couple of years at least, you know. So I took the PS4 upstairs and I was playing with headphones, but the headphones were just plugged into the PS4 controller, and I couldn't get it loud enough, and it sounded kind of like shit. And I was like, I can tell this is going to be amazing with headphones, but I might have to buy some of those
3D audio ones.
You know, the ones that they sell. Yeah, they have the premium like Sony branded ones that give you like the profiles that are tweaked and tuned for games. Like I'm thinking of investing in some of those soon for maybe my second playthrough.
Well, one of the things that the PS5 is going to do, I know this is a little bit off topic, but while we're on the topic of like audio, is I actually have 3D mics here. So cool. Like they're a new investment, and wow, I just like literally cannot stop recording things in 3D. It's amazing, but like essentially it's just two stereo mics in like the position of your left and right ear, but it's compounded, or it's like made more effective when the microphone's actually inside like a rubber ear, because the way that sound hits your exact ear canal and the shape of your ear influences how you specifically hear things. So PlayStation have said that in the future there may be a way for you to like photograph your ear, send this to PlayStation, and then you'll get a user profile where the sound on the game is tweaked.
Holy shit.
Yeah, tweaked
how
just
you
for
would
you.
hear it, yeah.
Which is just, I mean, that's some
fucking
that's some PlayStation 14 shit right there. Like, that's amazing.
Is the mic you've got like the one that they used from fucking Hellblade, James? Like it's a head or whatever.
These are a pair of these are overheads that you would use on drums, but they're basically like a stereo Samson left and right mic, and depending on your position, they're like powered. But you would put them wherever, and like you can hear sort of things in the room. But amazing for instruments and like and vocals and stuff like that. But anyway, getting a little bit off topic. So we're at we're at like an hour and 5. So I think we'll just like final like closing thoughts. If you had to, I know this is a bit reductive, but like obviously justify it as well. What like overall opinion of the game? What would you give it out of 10? And like, where do you think it stands? Some people are calling it like the game of the generation. Some people are saying it's the worst thing ever made. Like, where do you think it sits? Not just in the Last of Us series, but kind of in gaming in general. Like, does it meet the hype? Did it meet your expectations?
Rich, feel free to go first.
Yeah. For me, I'd give it a 9. I think the PlayStation 4 has brought some of the best games I've ever played this generation, and it's hard to kind of judge that because nostalgia is so strong for games you played when you were younger, but just trying to look at it kind of level-headedly and clear, I think it's really, especially towards the end of the generation, has brought some of the best games I've ever played, and this is one of them. I had a blast with it, and I think that's down to gameplay and story. It's not perfect. I think there are some bits are questioned and some bits that were a bit slow, but I think it's strange because there's bits you might find slow and might find hard or hard to get on with, but they make the better bits better. If it was kind of just constant, you would find that as a negative. So it's that balance. But the calms was actually where I enjoyed it a lot of the most, where you're just calm and you're talking with the characters and you're exploring stuff and just realizing this world.
For a while.
yeah, totally. And I absolutely had a blast with it. I didn't want to put it down, and yeah, I play very few games, but the ones I play that I love, I absolutely adore and feel very passionate about, which is why I've got gaming tattoos as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think it was good. I think I had probably as much fun playing it as I did the first one. I don't know whether it's a better story. I think it's a good story. I think it's a brave story, and I'm glad people like Neil are making these games. And I think it'd be a real sad thing if he gave up on the style he does to cater to just the mobs,
the lynch mob.
Yeah.
Where you go?
Much the same as Rich. Like, I don't feel like there's anyone else really doing what Naughty Dog are doing for story-based games. Like, maybe there are some other people attempting it, but I don't feel like there's anyone actualizing it as well as Naughty Dog do. They're in a league of their own, and I feel like, you know, there's two devs that have kind of stolen my heart this gen, and that would be like FromSoft and Naughty Dog. Like, everything else is
so
kind of
from each other.
Yeah, so different, but like they are kind of the masters of their craft. Like, Dark Souls is where I get my like gameplay nourishment, and Naughty Dog is where I get my story nourishment in games. And yeah, I think I'd give it like a kind of 9, edging towards like a 9.5 sort of thing. About as like close to perfect in many ways as that sort of game could be. Yeah, I mean, like, the plot drags in places, but again, like Rich was saying, they kind of help the whole in a way. Like, the fact that the game just keeps going on for so long, and there was multiple times when I was like, this must be the end soon. This must be the end soon. But then there's those moments where it all comes together and you see what the vision like really is, and you just go, fuck, man.
Yeah.
That was just something else. Like, gameplay, a lot better than the first. The story, you know, I'm not going to qualify them as like better or worse. I think the first one spoke to me more, like, personally, because it's about kind of, you know, like family stuff and abandonment. Like, I had a weird childhood, you know. But I think the storytelling in 2 is like incredibly bold, and it's doing stuff that other video games just aren't doing. And if Druckmann just stops, like, I'll be very sad. But maybe he should go and work at HBO instead, where people aren't such fucking.
I think that's fair enough.
He should make FIFA 21. I think that would be interesting.
Oh yes, mate. Give me Football Manager 2021 by Neil Druckmann. All over that. All over it.
I think I agree. Like, for the most part, I think the reaction. The negative reaction made me pretty sad, because if Naughty Dog were to stop making games, or they were to shy away from sort of doing these type of games, that would just be criminal, because like they really are the ones pushing the boundary. In some regards, maybe not in that. I think there has been better writing in other games. I think like Rockstar writing in Red Dead 2 is probably a little bit more. For me, it was more sort of real and personal. But as a package, I think I'm glad I played it. I'm glad that it exists. I'm not sure it completely justified existing when it had to follow up such a beloved game, and I'm not sure this was the absolute best way they could tell this story. Like I think it could have maybe been handled differently, but I think I came away going, this was a good experience. So generally positive, really positive, because it's one of the things that I feel most strongly about is the fact that usually if you had if you were given something a score, you would say, okay, well, I like this is near enough a 10, or I like, these are negatives, so that brings it down to an 8. But an 8's like good to average, but the strong parts are so strong, and they're so like no one's really doing those kind of things in terms of the visuals and just the level of like microscopic detail. It just feels reductive to give it like an 8, but it does have issues. So I'm glad it exists. I want to see Naughty Dog do some more stuff. I hope Neil Druckmann carries on, and I hope they don't give in to the lynch mob. But I do think there's room for a discussion for it not to be just this like untouchable masterpiece. I think that's where I sit with it.
I hope it emboldens him and the Naughty Dog guys more, if anything. I think if people are like screaming with such like prejudice and such like fury about kind of storytelling decisions and the inclusion of like LGBT characters and stuff like that, I think that's all the more reason to...
That's such bullshit.
Absolutely, yeah. I think people need to be making stuff like that more and more. Like, gaming is so full of like popcorn experiences. Like, James, you know I love Assassin's Creed, but it's fluff. There's nothing there. Like, I loved Odyssey, but it's a fat lot of nothing. It's 120 hours of candy.
It's gameplay junk food.
Yeah, it's absolutely junk food. And like, how many games nowadays can you really like come away from saying that you like felt kind of mentally and spiritually like nourished by it? And The Last of Us was not something where I felt like I just spent a bunch of hours like wasting my fucking time on some popcorn. You know, I felt like I'd eaten a meal and had a fucking debate over the meal with it.
That's the thing. Like this game would probably been 10 out of 10 if it had zero story, because the graphics and the gameplay is so good that nobody's questioned it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think they can. I think they're objectively great. Like, there's no way to say that.
Yeah.
That
like, it just would have
bad.
been. It's better than every other game if you take the story away. Just the fact that it made you feel something, people are annoyed, and it's like, well, that's the amazing thing about it.
I think the most transcendent thing about the game is the way that the story and the narrative meet for me. Is like, you know, the combat is fucking brilliant.
It's amazing.
It really is.
Absolutely
It
amazing.
It evokes Metal Gear Solid Phantom Pain a lot for me, which is like the other best stealth game, action stealth,
I love
whatever.
The gameplay. I felt just so weighty.
Yes.
People always talk about things like Doom and they're like, oh, it feels great. But I mean, like, Naughty Dog don't get props enough for like how good their weapon mechanics feel.
They don't.
There's times where
average.
There's times when I fumbled with the controller just out of panic, and you just perform this amazingly liquid move, and you're just like, cool, I'm happy with that. My character's not just going like this. It's just they implemented it so well.
I think the fact that the story actually meshes with the gameplay like a lot more this time, like, you know, they tried to do that kind of Spec Ops kind of thing where it was like, you should feel bad for doing all these digital murders, and like, I felt bad. You know, I felt guilty and culpable.
I felt justified.
I felt justified, but then at times I was like, oh wait, was I justified? Was that okay? I don't know.
Yes.
And thus the tragedy of the whole story, and why I think it's such an effective game. So yeah, I think they upped their game, and yeah, I loved it. It was great.
Well, we couldn't talk about Assassin's Creed 3 for this long, could we, or like anything like that? The fact we're even having this debate and people are so riled up about it has to speak like in its credit, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's made discussions, which is the whole point of it.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. You've been listening to the Invicta Gaming Podcast, and hopefully we will see you guys next time. Thanks.